Stay with me on this. You have to enrich uranium to build a nuclear bomb. The Director of National Intelligence reported to Congress that in Iran there have been no efforts since last year to rebuild their enrichment capability. And yet, that's the part Tulsi Gabbard omitted from her Senate testimony today. She just won the Illinois Democratic Senate primary. Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton joins us on her agenda, abolishing ICE and opposing Chuck Schumer as Democratic leader. TSA agents caught in the partisan scrum over DHS funding. Two congressmen, Democrat Jim McGovern of Massachusetts and Republican Marlin Stutzman of Indiana, give us the state of play. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. In this, the third week of the war with Iran, President Trump has hammered away at one overarching justification: the imperative to deny Iran a nuclear weapon. Polls show the country generally supports this particular objective, much more than it supports regime change, destroying ballistic missiles capable of hitting southern Europe, or dismantling Iranian proxy armies in the Middle East. Those are other objectives the president has cycled through since this war began. We note here that Operation Midnight Hammer, carried out last June, obliterated, Trump's favorite word, Iran's nuclear infrastructure, but it left behind an estimated 970 pounds of uranium enriched close to weapons-grade levels. So what's happened to that uranium since? Was Iran trying to enrich it to levels necessary to produce one or more nuclear bombs? Was it rushing to do this? This, it seems, is a pretty urgent matter. Here's what the Director of National Intelligence reported to Congress last night, and I quote, "As a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There has been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability," unquote. Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, did not say those words in her Senate testimony today. Senator Mark Warner, the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, wanted to know why. And if what you're about to hear sounds just a tad repetitive, it's to establish something written but not spoken.
Even in your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president had said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir. I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions.
So you chose to take
my oral delivered remarks.
You chose to omit the parts that contradict the president. The president continues to say as well that he had no idea, was shocked that the Iranians had moved to take over the Strait of Hormuz.
I'm not aware of those remarks, and I think those of us here at the table can point to the fact that historically the Iranians have always threatened to leverage their control over the Strait of Hormuz.
Why would the president say he was amazed?
I'm not aware of those remarks.
What about the comments the president made that thought that he was surprised again, reports that Iran struck the adjacent Gulf states?
Again, I'm not aware of those remarks.
For the record, the president never said he was shocked about the Strait of Hormuz, but actions or lack of actions underscore a lack of preparation to mitigate Iranian efforts to threaten vessels there. The president did say he was surprised that Iran launched drones and fired missiles at neighboring Gulf nations. But the question of Iran's nuclear capabilities matters as much, if not more, than any of those others. What did the president believe about that threat? How did he come to that belief? This matters because CBS News reporting today confirms Trump is still weighing a military mission to locate and retrieve that highly enriched uranium inside Iran, wherever it might be. That means boots on the ground and all the risks that entails. Again, to quote the Director of National Intelligence, no efforts since last year by Iran to rebuild their enrichment capability. Our Weijia Jiang joins us now from the White House. Weijia, I also want to play something else that was an exchange with Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, from John Ossoff, Democrat from Georgia, about this question of imminent threat. Please listen.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
The only person who can determine that is the president. Weija, that brings us to the White House and what the president is currently thinking about that, as well as potential U.S. military efforts inside Iran to retrieve, as we reported today, enriched uranium.
And Major, the reason why these 2 points matter so much to Democrats is because these are two of the main reasons the president and the administration said were justifications for starting this war to begin with. Administration officials said that there was evidence that Iran was rebuilding its nuclear capability. That's one reason. Number two was this imminent threat to the United States that the president insists was active. And that is why he said he preemptively took steps to thwart that attack. And that is also why Democrats spent so much time pressing Gabbard for more clarification about that. But as we just heard in her own words, she didn't offer much clarity. She sidestepped many of the questions and punted to the president in that last exchange there, even saying that it's not my job to determine whether there's an imminent threat to the homeland, that the president can only do that. Later, Ossoff and other Democrats argued that that's exactly your job, to assess threats, to present them to the president. And yes, while it's true it's his job to decide how to respond and whether to take military action, they want to know more about what this community and 18 different intelligence agencies determined. And you know, Major, we have to mention that this hearing is coming on the heels of one of her deputies resigning over this, the first defector from the Trump administration to say explicitly there was no imminent threat, and that is why he says he can no longer work for the administration and really undermine the president's argument about this war. It's notable that she herself has not talked about that deputy, Joe Kent, who, of course, we've been reporting on now for 2 days.
Weija Jiang at the White House. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Travelers, airport travelers for sure, are feeling the full effects of this partial government shutdown, which really deals with funding for the Department of Homeland Security. As you can see on the video there, airports across the country plagued with long lines as TSA call-outs continue to multiply. Lawmakers, both sides of the aisle, remain divided over how to resolve this. On the ground, CBS Mark Strassman has been following this, and he joins me from Philadelphia. Mark Strassman, catch us up on what's happening and what you're seeing.
Hey, Major, if there's a takeaway for the takeout, it's this. If you're flying, pack extra patience because frustration at the airport is here to stay for a while. Case in point, this checkpoint in Terminal D at Philadelphia's airport, it's open. It all looks normal. Great. That's the way it should be. But there are 6 terminals here, 6 checkpoints, and 3 of them are open. So you get about a 50-50 chance of finding a terminal that's open when you show up at the airport here in Philadelphia. And that is not all that unusual. As an example of the frustration factor around the country, roughly 10% of TSA agents are not showing up for work. In some airports, that percentage is significantly higher. It can be 30 or 40% in airports in Atlanta and Houston and New Orleans. And when you don't have enough people showing up to provide security at the airport, the lines are just going to get longer. And so you have 2-hour waits or longer in some places. Major airports like Atlanta, which are always slammed, are just that much more frustrating than ever. So, Major, it's, again, without Congress seeming to show any interest in resolving this impasse, as I said, the frustration factor is here to stay.
Mark, sometimes when you're frustrated, it's wonderful to talk to a reporter, but many times it isn't. I'm just curious if anyone's been willing to talk to you about what they're actually feeling, who they think is to blame for this, and how they're trying to adapt to something that is a big hassle.
Well, you hear, when you talk to people, of course, the usual frustration, right? And people now are getting the message that there's a problem, and so they made an effort to get here 2 or 3 hours early. But I remember talking to one guy a couple of days ago in Atlanta at the airport, and what he said was, and he had been waiting for a while, and this frustrated guy said, that these politicians just need to get out of our way and let us live our lives. And I think that sort of sums up what for many people is the issue here. They feel caught in the middle, just like the TSA officers, caught in the middle of this impasse between Republicans and Democrats and how to fund the DHS and what are the concessions that have to be made. And what you have as in the aftermath of all that is all these people trying to get to their flights, trying to get to their gates, and just feeling as though they're really on some terrible march to get there.
Right. Stressed out enough, and now more stress. Mark Strassman, never stressed out, coming to us from Philadelphia. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. Earlier today, Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican, had his confirmation hearing for Homeland Security Secretary. It was, at times, pretty heated, with Mullin being accused by fellow Republican Rand Paul of Kentucky of having anger management issues. President Trump tapped Mullin, you might remember, to replace Kristi Noem. She was demoted earlier this month over what administration insiders described as leadership failures, particularly regarding her approval of an expensive TV ad campaign in which she was prominently featured, as well as fallouts from very aggressive ICE operations and Border Patrol operations in Minneapolis. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga joins me now. Speaking of Minneapolis, there was an exchange with Markwayne Mullin about comments that he made very soon after, almost immediately after the Alex Preddy shooting. He was asked if those remarks in which he echoed that Alex Preddy could have been a domestic terrorist stood the test of time and evidence. Here's what happened.
Those words probably should have been retracted. I shouldn't have said that, and as Secretary, I wouldn't. The investigation is ongoing, and there is, like I said, there's sometimes going to make a mistake, and I'll own it. That one, I went out there too fast. I was responding immediately without the facts. That's my fault. Sir, I just said I regret those statements.
Is that the same as an apology?
I haven't seen the investigation. We'll let the investigation go through, and if I'm proven wrong, then I will absolutely.
I was responding immediately without the facts.
3 words that we did not hear from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. That's my fault. Taking accountability for what he said, which at the very least, Major, shows a change in leadership at the helm of DHS in saying, look, I was too quick to react to the situation on the ground, and not blaming others for the kind of information that he might have received. We also did get some policy insights, though, about how the department might change under his leadership. Number one, and this was very quick, so those who were not paying attention might have missed it, but he said immigration agents will only enter a home or business unless they are in a hot pursuit if they have a judicial warrant. Now, that is a big distinction from what occurred under Secretary Noem and the change in policy to allow ICE agents to make entry with only an administrative warrant signed not by a judge, but by an ICE official.
Right. So the difference there is external judicial review as opposed to internal ICE-directed review. This administration was using internal ICE reviews only, or in some cases.
Another policy that made Secretary Noem unpopular, not just among the halls of Congress, but also within the department, was her policy put in place last summer that required her signature on any expense throughout DHS of over $100,000. Markwayne Mullin said he would revoke that policy, that he doesn't want to see a backlog, especially when it comes to disaster relief funding. He certainly knows from his own constituents what havoc that created. And also he said, I'm not a micromanager. So sort of an interesting, perhaps not intentional, but aside to Secretary Noem and her leadership. And also referring to the civil servants there at FEMA who can handle this as well without him having to micromanage them. He said he would empower leadership underneath him. And by the way, pay attention in the next few weeks. We do expect, bottom line, that he will be confirmed, despite the political beef that you referenced earlier. Yep. And it is political beef with the chairman here, Rand Paul. We do think John Fetterman, Democrat, will vote him out of committee. We do think that next week the Senate will vote to confirm him. The Republicans will have that vote. If and when that does happen, you will see him usher in new leadership ranks among the components at DHS, one of them being FEMA right now, which does not have a permanent leader. We're also going to be watching CBP, ICE, CISA, you name it. Also, keep in mind, the Department of Homeland Security, on its 32nd, 33rd day of being shut down. Right. And so that was the other big takeaway from today, that he said, listen, he appealed to his colleagues, you know, almost as brothers and sisters. Yeah. Let's move on. Let's get something done.
Comprehensive as always. Nicole Skanga, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Today, the Federal Reserve did what most people thought it would do, left its benchmark interest rate unchanged. The central bank cited, yes, you know what they cited, economic uncertainty, including potential impacts downstream from the war still going on with Iran. CBS's Richard Escobedo was at the Federal Reserve, and he joins me for the first time at the family table. Richard, great to have you here. What happened?
Well, the Fed...
We know nothing much happened. Explain why nothing much happened.
Nothing much happened, and people have been expecting this for a week, as you said. But the theme of today was uncertainty. No one really knows what's going to happen. By my count, the Fed chair mentioned the word uncertain or uncertainty at least 7 times over his hour-long press conference. And all that uncertainty is being fueled by this war in Iran that the U.S. started. But he said it's too soon to really assess what's going on, and it's really, unclear what the scope and duration of this is going to be. So it's going to take some time for the U.S. to be able to, or for the Fed, which has the top economists in the world, to be able to model this out. With the information that it has, this group of 12 Fed members, with this incredible data from their economists, said that inflation is likely to end the year higher than what they were predicting back in December. The Fed likes inflation about 2%. Right. They're expecting that by the end of this year, it will be at 2.7%. So that's about 0.3% higher than where they were at the end of 2025.
And there was an inflation print today that did not include any of the inflationary fuel prices or oil prices from the war with Iran that was also up and beat expectations on the high side.
A lot of these snapshots that you're seeing in the data over the last several weeks don't take that into account. And I asked,
and yet are still inflationary.
And are still inflationary.
It's still high, which is of concern to the Fed.
And one of the things that I asked Fed Chair Powell about was the cost of diesel, because that factors into everything from the cost of food to the cost of the T-shirt you buy at Walmart. And I asked him, how big of a concern is this for you? And he said, right now it's I want to make sure I get the language right, but he said it's a general concern, but there is fear that this spills over into sort of more baseline inflation, what's called core inflation, which takes out things that are more volatile like food and energy to things that are really affected right now by the war. And he said it's, again, it's uncertain, and it's ultimately going to take time to see how this affects the economy.
And what is the price point, market and otherwise, of uncertainty? The Dow was down today. All the indices were down, and oil prices, Brent and West Texas Intermediate, both up. Richard Escobedo, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Still to come on the Takeout, Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, winner with the help of J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, of the Senate Democratic primary. She joins me live next. Also, Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern and Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman join us. Topics: DHS spending standoff, the Iran war, and potential regime change in Cuba. Plus, what does online betting do to your brain, your enjoyment of sports? All these things. Well, the Atlantic's McKay Coppins joins us to discuss his very personal odyssey in this world. It was bankrolled by the Atlantic magazine. Most definitely a cautionary tale. Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton has secured the Democratic nomination for Senate in her state. She won the primary about 7 points last night, pretty comfortably, looking to fill the seat of longtime Senator Dick Durbin. Lieutenant Governor Julia Stratton joins me now. Madam Lieutenant Governor, it's great to have you here. Congratulations on your victory. But as you know, in politics, you win the victory and you get on to work. So the biggest issue in the country right now, overwhelmingly, is the war with Iran. I'd like your attitude about what it is, what it isn't, and what it should be.
I'm sorry, about what?
The war with Iran.
Oh, yes. So, I think this is another example of where Americans woke up in the middle of the night and to a social media post from our president who, talked about an act of war. It wasn't something that anybody has asked for. It certainly wasn't what I was hearing on the campaign trail, where people talked about wanting access to health care and higher wages and making sure they can have affordable housing. This is a president who, didn't have a plan, doesn't tell us why he's doing what he's doing, just kind of on a whim takes action, and it's not in the best interest of the American people. So I've made it clear that my perspective is that I would not support any supplemental funding for this war, and certainly not a war that anybody has asked for.
During the campaign, you also said you want to abolish ICE because the agency cannot be reformed. So not change its procedures, abolish it entirely. No more ICE agents anywhere if you get your way. Is that correct?
Well, I've always said, for example, that we need, of course, border security, and border security can happen at the border. But what we saw with Operation Midway Blitz here in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois is we saw Border Patrol agents going down through downtown Chicago. We saw ICE agents in our communities after Donald Trump said that he was going after the quote unquote worst of the worst. But that's not who he went after. We saw tamale vendors and daycare providers, agents going into churches and places of business and even schools where we've saw a lot of activity. And so this is a time that I don't believe that this agency can be reformed. I believe that we need to start looking at what can we do with all of that money that that agency has, because what Donald Trump is doing is not about immigration. It's not about public safety. It's about trying to normalize the presence of the military on American soil. So let's really invest in a system that works for legal, to put people on a path to legal immigration. Invest in more immigration judges, make sure that we have community-based resources and social services, and not criminalize our immigrant neighbors.
Many Democrats looking back at 2024 and 2022 wonder if the defund the police slogan became toxic. Do you have any fear, Madam Lieutenant Governor, that abolish ICE could be viewed with similar toxic points of view?
Well, what I can say is that we have talked about meeting this moment. And what I'm hearing from voters every single day is people are tired of the status quo. They're tired of a sort of go along to get along mentality. They want to see leaders who are going to meet this moment with courage and bold ideas. And that's exactly how I won this campaign. I didn't talk about how do we just maintain the status quo. I talked about what are the things that really reflect the real frustration people have with Washington right now. So whether it's thinking about the fact that we don't want these agents in our communities terrorizing our communities, and by the way, the trauma has continued, or whether we see a president who every single day is thinking about how to turn away, roll back our rights, our fundamental rights. We need to make sure that we have real fighters in Washington. And that is what I'm hearing from voters. And that's why I was successful in this election.
Is the current Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, a real fighter?
Well, I've already said that I wouldn't support Chuck Schumer for leadership in the Democratic caucus because I believe we need new voices and new energy to meet the moment.
Who would you support?
Well, I mean, we'd have to see who puts their name in the hat. I mean, I would hear all of that. But what I do know is that right now we need real fighters in Washington, and we need people who are going to be courageous leaders to stand up to a wannabe dictator in the White House.
And if you were to try to describe for my audience what you find less than compelling about Chuck Schumer, what would it be?
Well, I'm not sure that I need to fully describe it for your audience. I think what the overall sentiment that I am hearing from voters is Washington as a whole needs to stand up and recognize this is not a normal president. It's not even a normal person. And this is not a time that we need to sort of, give in or try to use some of the same tactics that might have worked with some other president. We need somebody who's going to speak out, make sure that they fight back, hold the line when we can hold the line, and not try to use traditional negotiation tactics. I'm a lawyer, and by background, I taught mediation and negotiation skills. I served as a mediator and had an alternative dispute resolution firm. And here's what I always know. You cannot negotiate with people who come to the table in bad faith. And so we don't need to try to negotiate and figure out how they're going to work with us when they are literally every day taking away people's health care, ripping food out of the mouths of hungry children, rolling back our rights, and punishing states like Illinois simply because we have we dare to stand up to this president.
The body that you hope to be a member of right now, this week, is debating something called the Save America Act. I'm sure you're familiar with that legislation. The president is pressuring Senate Republicans to do away with the filibuster so this can be passed. What is your attitude about the filibuster itself in different legislative priorities? Would you go to Washington and be part of the Democratic caucus that would seek to get rid of the 60-vote threshold so Democrats with a Senate majority of 50+1 could do things?
Yes, when we take back the Senate, I want to abolish the filibuster. I mean, look at all of the progress that has been prevented and put on hold because of it, whether it's common sense gun legislation, protecting reproductive freedom, protecting voting rights, which still continue to be under threat. And these are things that we've been able to get done in Illinois, by the way. In all of those categories, we have been able to have common sense legislation to protect these rights. And we're not seeing that happen in Washington. I want to bring the Illinois blueprint to Washington, D.C. And I believe that when we take back the Senate, that abolishing the filibuster will be one of the ways that we can get those big things done to benefit Americans all across the country.
Last question before I let you go. The governor, J.B. Pritzker, a big supporter of yours. Should he seek the nomination in 2028, would you endorse him?
Absolutely. Governor Pritzker would be a fantastic president, and we'll see what he decides to do. But he has done, the two of us together have really provided some real leadership here in the state of Illinois. We've been partners in governance for the last 7 years. And I can't think of, a better leader who has demonstrated how you think big, how you get things done, how you deliver for the people that you represent, and who leads with such courage and compassion. And I think whatever he decides to do, he'll be great at it. And I've been honored to work by his side.
Illinois Democratic Lieutenant Governor and Senate nominee, Juliana Stratton. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern joins me to discuss his recent push to repeal an economic embargo on Cuba following the country's third energy outage in just 4 months. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner, where we're calling a bit of an audible. The House is voting right now, so members of Congress who are prepared to come to the mics and the cameras and making their way there. So we're going to move our positioning around a little bit and start with a different segment. But we'll get back to our lawmakers as soon as we can, when all this logistic stuff gets sorted out. Question: how much money could you make if you were given $10,000 to gamble on sports, particularly online sports gambling? Well, that's what The Atlantic's McKay Coppins sought to answer in his latest piece. Sucker, my year as a degenerate sports gambler. McKay Coppins joins me now. So I was fascinated by the modifier degenerate. You could have just called yourself a gambler. What's the degeneracy part?
Well, degenerate gambler is a term that a lot of gamblers wear proudly. And in fact, it's funny that you're the first one to ask me about this. We were actually a little worried about using that term because some people take offense. As it turns out, once the story came out, there was offense taken by gamblers, but it was that I hadn't fully earned the title yet. I needed to lose a lot more money before I could be considered a degenerate gambler.
Yes, exactly. There's a degeneracy club, and It's got a much higher threshold of losses than your paltry 9,800 or whatever it was.
That's exactly right.
Got it. So you were not a gambler?
No.
And you wanted to do sort of a spiritual experiment and a practical experiment. What would happen to you once you got into this world, took a dive into online gambling, which is different than going to a casino or a sports, what's the
sportsbook.
Sportsbook, yeah. So what's it like online?
I mean, it's completely different, right? Whereas you used to have to go to a physical location, often in a place like Las Vegas, to gamble on a game. Now, most people in America, wherever they live, walk around with a casino in their pockets. You can, within a few minutes, download one of these big apps, type in your debit card information, and a whole menu of bets, not just for like the NFL, NBA, college basketball, bets for any sport around the world. Cricket matches in India, Lithuanian ping pong, you can bet on anything. And the difference is that it's all consuming, right? Like our phones already are, can be very addictive. compulsive, right? Putting gambling on a smartphone makes it so difficult for a lot of people to resist the temptation.
And you write in the piece that there has been in our country historically a moral hazard proposition about gambling. We've been generally, as a society, said this is probably a bad thing.
Yes.
And yet this has sort of opened a literal floodgate online to this activity. And we don't seem to have absorbed some of the built-in hazards that are now flowing through that open channel.
It's one of the strangest things about this current Wild West moment of gambling in America. For literally most of America's history, we had taken the same lesson that every civilization before us took, which is that gambling is a vice that is soul-rotting, potentially civilizationally ruinous, and that it should be stigmatized and regulated, right? Now, look, gambling has always existed. Some people do it illegally. They did before, this last 10 years. But the fact that it is so pervasive, so available, and so unavoidable. I mean, if you turn on any game at any time of the day on any channel, you are bombarded with these neon-soaked ads for online sportsbooks.
Right. If you're a consumer of sports, which I am, I have to plow mentally through this kudzu of ads to get me to try to gamble.
Yeah.
And I don't want to gamble.
And that is a pretty new development, right? 10 years ago, that was not the case. 8 years ago, the Supreme Court overturned the federal ban on sports betting, opening the way for states to legalize it in their respective territories. And most states now have. And that's how we entered this new era. These online sports books realized that there was a massive opportunity to make money. The sports leagues got on board, and that's why we see it everywhere.
And you tried to get better at this.
I did.
And the lesson is you can do a lot of work. You can go to a lot of smart sites. And you're still, more often than not, going to lose.
Not just more often than not. I remember an early conversation I had with Nate Silver, the
guru of gurus.
Yes, he's a
spiritual and otherwise
famous statistical nerd. He's a longtime gambler. He has made hundreds of thousands of dollars, mostly in poker tournaments. I asked him, if I'm starting with $10,000, what would be a good season for me? How much would I have to win? And he was almost confused by the question. He said, if you make 1 penny, you'll be better than 98% of gamblers. And I don't think people quite realize that. Almost everybody over the course of their lifetime will lose money gambling. But the sports books are very good at convincing you that you're just one bet away from making it all back.
And you're not going to do it again because in Virginia you filled out a form. What is that form?
Self-exemption form. It's not just in Virginia. Almost every state that has legalized sports betting has a self-exemption form that you can fill out to cut yourself off from gambling. At least
on online platforms.
Yes, online. And I would recommend anybody who's watching it, if they think they might have a gambling problem, it's like Odysseus binding himself to the mast, right? Like you basically make sure that you can't keep gambling. I filled one out the day after the Super Bowl. I have not gambled since.
Odysseus references always welcome here, as are you, my good friend.
Thank you
so much. Appreciate it. McKay Coppins, what a pleasure. Read the piece, ladies and gentlemen. It's excellent. Fresh off the floor, there he is. Logistics issues ironed out. Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern. We'll talk about all the things we was pitched about a little bit ago. Thanks. Come back. Welcome back to Takeout. Thanks for rolling with us today. Power is being restored to Cuba after a total blackout hit the island earlier this week. I want to turn now to Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern, who recently introduced a bill to repeal the economic embargo against Cuba. Congressman, I guarantee we'll get to Cuba in a second, but I just want to ask you about this DHS funding standoff, because yesterday the White House sent legislative text to Congress as a part of the negotiation saying it would expand the use of body-worn cameras, limit civil immigration enforcement in schools and hospitals, enforce the use of visible officer identification, and would not deport any U.S. citizens. Is that enough? If not, why not?
No. No, it's not enough. Look, I'm somebody who believes that ICE ought to be abolished. I've thought that since 2018, when they were separating children from their parents. So for me, I don't want to fund ICE, but I've signed on to a discharge petition to fund all the other agencies. TSA, Coast Guard, FEMA. I think we could, pass a bill that would fund all of those departments, without hesitation. But Trump is insisting on doubling down on funding ICE and CBP. And he controls the White House. The Republicans control the Senate. They control the House. You know, they can do whatever the hell they want to do. But if they want my vote, you know, what they propose is not enough.
And if you see an angry constituent at Logan Airport because the line is 3 hours, what do you tell that constituent?
That I want to fund TSA, but I can't get Donald Trump or the Republicans to allow us to bring up a bill to actually fund TSA. That's what I'm going to tell them.
I want to play for you sound, Congressman, from the president yesterday about Cuba and the Secretary of State / National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio. Please listen.
Well, Cuba right now is in very bad shape. They're talking to Marco, and we'll be doing something with Cuba very soon.
The embargo is tied to political change on the island. The law, the embargo is codified. And, but the bottom line is their economy doesn't work. It's a non-functional economy.
Non-functional economy organically or because of the pressure the United States is applying?
Look, we have been strangling the island of Cuba for over 6 decades, and this administration has doubled down on that. You know, I was proud to be part of a team that went to President Obama and got him to change our policy toward Cuba, to open things up, and things were beginning to move in a different and more positive direction. Trump won the election and basically reversed that policy, and unfortunately Joe Biden didn't do a damn thing until the very last weeks of his presidency, and by then it was too late. And Donald Trump was able to reverse that as soon as he became president. So you know, I believe that the best way to open things up on Cuba is to lift the trade embargo. Let's have normal trade relations. Let's encourage people to visit Cuba, more cultural exchanges, more academic exchanges. I think that's the way to go.
While you adjust your earpiece, and I appreciate you for gamely doing that, Congressman, well done. The president says he wants a regime change, or implies that he wants a leadership change, at least at the very top of the Cuban government. What authority does he have for that, and do you support that?
Yeah. First of all, Donald Trump's comments on Cuba are cringy. I mean, let's get to the bottom line of what he really wants. He wants to turn Cuba into a client state where he can basically control the Cuban people and tell them what to do and what not to do. It's not about human rights. It's not about freedom. It's not about democracy. It's never been about that with regard to Cuba or Venezuela or quite frankly, any other country in the world. This is about Donald Trump trying to work out a deal to enrich himself or his family or his big donors. So, I mean, the bottom line is that, you know, I don't think the Cuban people want Donald Trump to basically dictate their lives. I don't think they want Marco Rubio or anybody in the United States to tell them what to do and what not to do. I think we should try to encourage the opening of more political space through diplomacy and through dialogue, and to basically let the Cuban people determine their future, not people in the United States. I mean, that is a throwback to the days of when the United States was in bed with Batista. That led to a revolution that brought you Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution. So, I mean, again, you know, with Trump, it's not about the Cuban people. It's about his own self-enrichment.
Massachusetts Democratic Congressman Jim McGovern handling the earpiece expertly, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We'll come back and we'll have a better earpiece for you, I promise you. Up next, Indiana Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman about the possibility of the United States sending ground forces of whatever composition to Iran. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Sources tell CBS News President Trump has yet to make a decision, which he is mulling seriously, about sending U.S. ground troops into Iran. I'm joined now by Indiana Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman. Congressman, it's good to have you with us. On this program last night, Ted Cruz, Texas Senator, Republican, said he could imagine a scenario in which boots on the ground are necessary and defensible. Can you?
Well, I'll tell you, Major, I would sure like to see us finish out the air strikes that our military has been performing. I think they've done a remarkable job. And, you know, if anything, we really need to be sure that the Iranian people are ready to help, you know, to take their country back. There's other folks, obviously, in that area that have a deep interest in what happens in Iran. So I don't know. For me, for the information that I know, I would say it's too soon to say that. But I do want to see that at this point that there is a new opportunity for the Iranian people with their country, and also that it'll bring peace and stability to the Middle East and to the region.
When I interviewed the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for 60 Minutes, I asked him about the possible necessity of using ground forces, special operators or otherwise, to get the highly enriched uranium out of Iran. And he said that remains an option on the table. The president has indicated as much, and those close to him indicate as much. Is that a mission you would support?
Yeah, I think that's really what the mission should be, is to destabilize any of their capability for a nuclear weapon or any sort of nuclear power for that matter. We just can't trust this regime. I mean, I would, of course, want to see an opportunity where there is a new government in Iran. But here we are going after the assets and destroying the assets that just simply will weaken the regime if they would somehow be able to maintain any sort of power. But I think our real mission should be to support the Iranian people and do what we have to do to debilitate this regime in order for a new one to surface. So, but if that's a way to do it, taking out opportunities for a nuclear program, their military assets, those are all things I would support.
I asked Senator Cruz this last night because the Israelis are systematically targeting senior Iranian regime figures and killing them. Eliminate is the phrase the Israeli government frequently uses. And I asked Senator Cruz, do you believe it is possible for the Israelis or the United States to kill their way to regime change?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that's one of the ways that this is kind of like a revolutionary war. This is different than what we've seen in the past. Before we've seen this, this big buildup with troops, with tanks, with trucks, moving into Iraq. It took us so long to finally get to Saddam Hussein. And I think in this case, it's more of a top-down strategy and go straight for the top. I mean, look what happened in Venezuela, just simply by taking, and of course, that mission was, in hindsight, much simpler and easier than what we ever anticipated it to be in Venezuela. But I think that would be the goal here with Iran as well. I think you got the support of the people predominantly, but they're weak. They don't have the ability to defend themselves. So by taking out the top, I think this is a new strategy, one that to me makes a lot of sense, rather than spending a lot of time and money moving into a country with our air superiority and with our technology and able to see what's going on inside. We have this ability to be inside, taking out these leaders that I think will weaken the regime and hopefully cause them to fall, and a new regime or new administration can be put into place.
To what degree, Congressman, are your constituents restive right now? And if restive isn't the proper word, maybe angered or alarmed by the rise in gas prices, which appear only to be increasing because the global price of oil keeps increasing?
Yeah, well, I think, Major, a lot of times we all kind of measure the economy by the gas pump. And we have seen gas prices at all-time lows during the Trump administration compared to what we saw during the Biden administration. Prices are still lower today than what they were during the Biden era. So I think that's one thing that people are considering. Now, if they go much higher, if they get up over $4, $4.25, I think that's when people are going to really start complaining, and me too. So I think as long as we know this is a temporary jump because of the instability in the Middle East. Once President Trump gets control of the Straits of Hormuz and can secure the traffic through there, I think we'll start to see, things settling back down, hopefully within the next month or two. But, obviously there's going to be a jump when there's this sort of attack in Iran, and it's rightly a concern of all of ours.
I appreciate the time. Congressman Ron Sussman, Republican, Indiana. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Major.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. You know what this is, The Takeout. You know what we are, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, and occasionally clever. The Daily Report coming your way next.